Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean DeVias, coming to you live from Reviv's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. I'd like to welcome NineTwoThree Venture Studio CEO Andrew Amann to the Reboot Chronicles. To unpack what I think is kind of important, is like, how do we help entrepreneurs and new ventures become more successful? Andrew runs one of the fastest growing product design engineering studios that has built dozens of companies and hundreds of products used by millions of people that have created over $1 billion in revenue. Serial entrepreneur and a go-to-market pro, which is why I like him. Andrew has developed lots of patents, launched over a dozen startups, and has had some successful exits along the way, apparently. Andrew, good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Dean. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's I thought it'd be helpful to just kind of unpack a little bit about, how can we help kind of de-risk the high failure rates of startups and things. So we can get into that. Maybe we should just start out with incubators, accelerators, venture studios. I'm very active in all three of those, but you and I know kind of the subtle differences. So, but I think people, whenever I go to a cocktail party, I have a hard time explaining it to people, or maybe they just don't care that much. I don't know. But can you kind of give us your take on how do you kind of put those in three buckets?
Sure. So we were a venture studio from 2019 to 2022. And what I pictured and imagined us to be is the ability to curate and figure out a product market fit for a product we start from scratch. So we would come up with ideas in an industry. We'd try to figure out exactly how that product would fit in the market. And then there were certain gates that we had to determine if this product was worth building or testing or continuing to put money into. So a venture studio, I believe, is building from 0 to 1 with internal ideas, sharing resources like finances, HR, sales, marketing, but then using product teams individually or siloed to build out the product to accelerate that product. And by the time they get to sales and marketing, hopefully those shared resources can jump in and help the rocket ship. An incubator to me is more along the lines of supporting a startup or supporting an idea and providing the resources around that infrastructure, I guess, if you want to say, to provide, basically to inject a resource when it's needed. So we see incubators all the time. And then the third one you asked about was a startup studio. Is that correct?
Or venture studio.
Yes, so we did venture studio first, and then I just did incubator, and the third one was
Accelerator. Incubator, accelerator, venture studio.
Yeah, accelerators, I mean, they're kind of exactly what they mean. Is what it says is it's just pushing a product from kind of the 0.5 stage to the 1 stage. And I think accelerators work very well when you have the right mentors and advisors in place. And we've seen those around the city here in Boston work extremely well in that scenario.
Yeah, I'm one of the co-founders of 1871, and people ask me, what is it? Are you an incubator accelerator? I said, yes, it's situational. It depends on who they are, what stage they're at. Yeah. I mean, we even brought Techstars in there when they first came to Chicago. They were co-located inside. So we'll do all types of... Before we get to the entrepreneur side, though, let's just talk about corporate innovation and we talk a lot on the show here about what's good, what's bad, what's ugly, what's broken. A lot of the incubation acceleration that we're doing in Chicago and some other cities around the world is really corporate based. I mean, our Dancing with Startups program is corporate based. And are you seeing a lot of that in circles you're running in?
So the two things we're seeing mostly with corporate innovation is around the idea of trying to figure out how to move to an AI strategy from an enterprise level or even a small business level. And so I see a lot of corporate innovators or a lot of spin outs from larger companies being told to put together a team, find an agency or find resources to accelerate the AI movement. With AI being so prevalent, I think a lot of strategies or a lot of companies are struggling to figure out exactly how to implement it securely, safely, and put it into the right systems. Right now, I think corporate innovation is centered around, not building the next product or not building the next, sexy app that they can put out into the marketplace, but truly looking at trying to find how can AI save them cost, save them money, and accelerate their current workforce into doing more tasks that are that cannot be replaced by AI. So specifically what I'm seeing is companies like Deloitte and McKinsey and EY. They're seeking out larger companies like you can go right down the list of any public company and trying to determine how to help them move into that AI world. And so, with all of us trying to figure it out together, I think corporate innovation has moved to corporate levels or C executives looking at the industry and saying, who can help me and who can securely take my data and make it make money for me.
But we're being too polite. I mean, let's face it, corporate innovation, they're always chasing the next thing. And they finally found something that is so complicated. Before it was big data, and a lot of them chased metaverse, even though we advised them not to, and IoT, which actually we're still working on. So
Yeah.
that's always good. But yeah, the consultants always run in with the great slideshow and stuff, and there's room to waste money there, so that's fine. But because some innovation is sloppy,
Yes.
it needs to be, and I'm actually okay with that, having been on both sides of it. But startups, they can't afford to like stumble and fumble around. So it's interesting because the big guys, it's a good transition, are like, with the Dancing with Startups program, the whole concept is let's rely on the startups,
Yeah.
not the big consulting, guys. Let's rely on people that actually can accelerate, choose the right thing. What are you going to do? And then how are you going to do it? And then let's do it.
Yep.
Startups on their own, maybe not so much, but let's maybe kind of come up with a top lessons learned about what, maybe pick on accelerators one last time here, and incubators and venture studios. So the data I'm looking at on my screen is like, I see a lot of venture studios that it seemed like a good concept. They haven't done that well. What's that all about?
Just the venture studio model and just the math behind building a venture studio. What I've found,
Is there math behind it?
there is a lot of math. Yeah, what I've found is in the venture studio. So I did my own math after collaborating with probably between 50 to 100 individuals that were part of a venture studio, had been part of a venture studio. There's about 750 there's a great collaborator that curates all of the startup studios and venture studios, and there's about 760 of them in that database. I started calling them and I got to about 300 when I realized half of them were either not in business anymore or the individuals had moved on from the venture studio into some other model. And I think by that point, I was getting to the realization that of the 700 that are there, they think it's an idea or they come up with some sort of debt funding to start off with building 10 companies. But I truly think the math is about 25 to 1. You need to have 25 companies for 7 years to have one of those companies return the entire fund. And if you look at Atomic, which is kind of the leader in the venture studio model, they have 3 public companies, one of them being him and hers. And if you look on their website, there's about 16 or 17 products the last time I looked that are things you can actually log into and are legitimate companies. But they have been said on podcasts before that they've come up with 6,000 ideas. So you imagine the weeding down to go from 6,000 to 17. And they on their websites have, I think it's $160 million funding in the first round and over $300 million in the second round to fund those startups, to build those public companies. But if the hit rate is really 6,000 to 17, it's a long journey for anyone to try to think that they can do that in a few years. So I do think the math of what I've tried to calculate when we were running our venture studio is how many companies do you need to build? And of those companies you build, what is the top line revenue that one of them needs to make? And then what is the profit that that company needs to make to return all of the losses that you inevitably will have?
Got it. Well, yeah, it's so with startup failure rates, anywhere from 80 to 90%, depending on the category. Of course, some are a lot lower. Gets a bad rap. But the whole idea was, it was supposed to make it better. And the numbers you just threw out were that they're just right there in the mix of failure with everything. And that's okay in the ideation phase, but not after you've launched all these companies.
That's correct.
You're supposed to bring it, the experience with people like you and I and others. It's like, no, we're supposed to help de-risk. So, all right. So you're perfect to ask a lot of questions about this because you kind of went through it. You guys did the same thing. You said, this model sucks. We're moving on. We have a smarter model, which was, I bet you got a lot of criticisms about it, but it was, at the end of the day, you have to pivot. But so let's go with the lessons learned from that. Like, what can entrepreneurs do now to kind of de-risk their whatever potential failure and make their journey more successful.
Yeah. And I think in building those startups, we realized two things. Sales and marketing is 90% of the effort that should be not only invested in, but put towards the startup founder's mind in how the product will be built. The features are just an ancillary vehicle to get the product into consumers' hands. But the
Yep.
sales and marketing and the community that you build is inevitable the reason why you either succeed or not. So in all of the ventures we built, we had 14 of them. There's two that have been acquired, a third one's in the process of being acquired. But we've had to shut down 11 companies, and that includes 11 people running those companies. And the realization, and I think to a new entrepreneur that's entering into any startup world, and we're an agency now, so we advise, hundreds of startups over the years of how to build products the proper way. And when they call me and they don't have product market fit, or they don't have a product that is like tangible yet, we truly tell them, like, what is your community? How many people can you launch this to on the day that you launched the product? Or that if you ask us to build this and we launch it, who's going to pick that up on day one? And if they don't have a community behind them, or an email list, or tens of thousands of people that they're already interacting with, it becomes a recipe of building before product market fit exists. And so the recommendation that I have now is find that community, go on that Facebook group, find those Reddit threads, and be a loud microphone and a loudspeaker of how you can, interject your idea the nice way, but ensure that those people will pay for it and put credit cards down when that product is built. And if the larger the community, the better, because you have better odds of conversion rates. But I think that community, or that niche that you're trying to find on those Facebook groups, gives you the opportunity to test the idea before you put any money into the product. And by testing ideas, you go through this kind of like a hero's journey, right? And it's the same story that every Airbnb, Twitter, and Uber went through as well, is that the first idea wasn't the best, right? Airbnb kind of cheated on the two-sided marketplace.
They
They
did.
they put video camera, they hired basically cameramen to go into New York City apartments and replace the Craigslist ads. And so they just sucked in Craigslist and said, we can do this better. But for years, they had better cameras, better shots of the rooms that they were selling for. And they, took the Craigslist ads and made them an Airbnb product.
Yeah,
And
and then another lesson there is they were going against an ambivalent competitor. Craigslist was,
right.
really didn't care that much. And same with
No.
Uber. It's like going up against taxi cab. There's no passion there.
Exactly right. But what you're truly doing when you're kind of helping the two-sided marketplace by cheating on one side is you're building the community and the people that have eyeballs on your product. And if you can do that early on, you don't necessarily need the product to be the answer. You need the human to be the answer, to say, I can help you. I can be a consultant. I can get you a better place in New York City to stay for 2 nights, right? I can get you that ride. And the more human interactions and the more ability that you can kind of, I call it the Wizard of Oz trick, be the wizard behind the curtain that makes it look like a computer is operating that system. Once you max that out, now our product is necessary to save you time and money, because you've already proven that the product is there and the people are willing to pay for it. So
Yeah.
for every entrepreneur, to answer your question very directly, it's build that community, and then be a hustler that doesn't have a product, that can pretend that that product exists and get it to work as far as you can before you decide to put money into building.
Yeah, and a lot of people are doing that now. It doesn't always work out the way. I try to, I'm like a simplification guy these days, but so when I sit down with whatever team it could be a big corporate one, could be a small venture, and so I just break every conversation into 2 buckets. Are we talking about the product roadmap, or are we talking about go to market crap? Because those are the only 2 things I want to talk to you about. And
Sure.
you're obviously an expert on the product roadmap stuff, because all the engineering and building the right thing. What I find on go to market, in addition to what you just said, it's like, I usually tell them, listen, there's a difference between innovation, especially the corporate guys, but we're talking small ventures here, and business innovation. Innovation is you invent something and people are using it. They're like, great, I love it. Business innovation is they're paying the right price where you can actually make a financial return, where you've got a real company.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is where I pinpoint a lot of failure. Any tips there on how to make it more real and scale and profitable?
I think what we see a lot is there's a lot of startups that you and I have seen over the years, and you can look at it and you just know, either by the founder, by the market that they're in, or even their website sometimes. You just look at it
Yeah.
and you're like, this isn't something that is a problem that people are facing, but it's also not scalable. Like this could work for 4 car companies or 3 trucking companies. But how does it work past that? How do you continue to sell the product, or how do you scale it? Airbnb is an obvious way that there's enough hotel rooms that just don't work out, and you want the suite, you want the extra room. The hotel rooms are booked up in the city, right? There's enough ancillary like ways to purchase a somebody's house or a room in somebody's house that you can eventually find the best avenue. But if you're building for a very small vendor, like a pizza shop, and you find success in that pizza shop, and you come out with a startup based on helping pizza shops, they don't have great margins to begin with. They don't have the ability to switch software like many other companies do. And at the end of the day, you're going pizza shop to sell a $10 product, right? And so you can visually see, after you're on the other side, of which products have scalability. And once you realize that, you start realizing that there's no new products that really exist. It's a combination of 4 or 5 products, or the efficiency of a large product, or removing a product. And when you
That
view it,
seems to be a movement too. Yeah.
exactly. And when you view it in that lens, you can say, great, Craigslist is a massive platform. If you just limit down to where people are, buying and renting rooms, that is a product on itself. And sure enough, it's a, 500, whatever their market cap is, $1 billion product, right? But in a startup sense, you have to understand, like, are you peeling away from a larger market and finding a large enough TAM to support this idea? Or are you trying to combine 3 or 4 products together to make it easier for someone to purchase that product, as opposed to the 3 products they were purchasing it before? And I truly think that is the scale for entrepreneurs to understand if they have the ability to, bring this to a real business and actually have an enterprise client on their own.
Yeah, good point. You threw out a term there, TAM, total addressable market. And I just like every presentation where I get the slide and they're telling me how big the market is, I'm like, I know how big the auto industry is. I know how many billions it is. Let's talk about what you can really get out of that. So sometimes it's just misunderstood expectations, especially with the entrepreneurs that are very positive and they just think they can just grab all this market share. I see a lot of this meets that as a way to convince investors, like, hey, we're doing, we're the Uber of this, we're the this or that. That tends to go so far. What I've noticed though, let's just try to break up the conversation, let's say business to business stuff, SaaS, is these companies, the customers, they want to buy more products from less companies. So this whole consolidation platform, is that a good strategy these days?
Yeah, so there's waves.
We're doing a startup. We're starting a startup right here on the program. Would you do that? It's like an aggregation play, right?
Yeah. So there are waves, and if you monitor those waves, you can jump on the bandwagon. And so what happened with Microsoft Office? It's a very good analysis with Microsoft Office and Google Drive. So Microsoft Office came along. They had the Windows CDs, and they pointed out that, like, you could purchase the CD once a year, and you'd have to up the model. And so everyone was fine with purchasing CDs and having an entire suite of Office products. All of a sudden, Google Drive came along, and Google came along and said, we have free services here. We have docs, we have slides. You don't need to pay for the whole thing. Just pay us, $6 a month for a user and your email provider, and we'll give you all this for free. Well, it quickly forced Microsoft to unbundle their Office suite. And once they did that, you now have 2 unbundlings happening at the same time, one being Google, one being Microsoft. And look what popped up out of that. Calendly, right? So they caught the wave and they said, I don't want to use Google. I don't want to use Microsoft. I don't want to just use their calendar app. There's a better way to do calendar, and Calendly exists. Pitch is a great PowerPoint / Google Slide competitor. They came out of that same unbundling phase. As these 2 products competed with each other, Pitch said, I'm just going to make a better PowerPoint that is actually online capable, and it's not free because Google Slides they don't really care about Google Slides. It's just a way for them to supply the product similar to Microsoft. And Pitch is like, I'm going to make a great product there. And then the whole market of project management came out of Microsoft Planner really being unbundled, because it used to be an add-on onto Microsoft Office. And so you saw Monday.com and Asana. And so if you catch the wave correctly, you'll find that these products can be stemmed out, or these startups can be stemmed out, because people are looking for a better solution in the unbundling, because they only cared about Microsoft Office because of Microsoft Planner. And now all of a sudden there's a better Microsoft Planner, and they'll just pay that, and they don't need the Office anymore.
Yeah, John Chambers was on recently. We talked about, seeing around corners and the not just the connected tissue, but the muscle memory that certain leaders have, and how can you really be successful? And he's like, well, one way is you can, like you said, you just have to kind of spot the waves.
Yes.
So we call them, we actually call them spotters, and you need people that are doing that. But now, so that example you just went through was a perfect one, right? Because now all these different companies came up with all these little services that all
Yes.
companies love. And then the next thing you know, you're a CEO, mid-cap company, hundreds of people, not tens of thousands. And you are basically have all your employees using 20 tools
Yeah. It's
that are all
ridiculous.
self-service service. So there's another wave there. It's like, hey, you don't have to use all these. We're going back
Yeah.
to consolidation of suites.
Yeah.
Even everyone from like a Zoho to a Salesforce is like, okay, we got to make this look simpler. Let us be the aggregation platform. The question here is different, though. It's like, how can you teach entrepreneurs, venture leaders, even corporate guys to basically spot the waves?
Yeah, and you got to do two things in that sense is the most successful founders I know, and I hang out with individuals that do 2 million and some do 100 million, right? But the
Hmm?
most successful ones I know have found that wave, and it's the most boring product, but it is very sexy for that niche or that idea. And I
Right.
think founders have to give up that they're going to change the world with a new feature or a new idea that is patent pending that no one's ever thought of before, because those products don't work. It's the combination of successful products or the unbundling of a product. Those are the revolutionary products that end up turning in hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think for a founder, they want that sexy proof that like TechCrunch put them on the cover of whatever because they came
Yeah.
up with the first idea for how to do cryptocurrency and combine it with some sort of AI. And they have all the buzzwords, they have the venture backing, they take a great picture. But at the end of the day, that product has a long road to prove to the rest of the market that it's the right product at the right time.
I know these guys.
Yeah,
I
we
think I
all
was.
do,
I
right?
think I was one
Yeah. I mean,
on one venture.
I
It's
was,
like, I don't want this. No, too
yeah,
much publicity. We're not that good. Are we bundling? Are we unbundling? I'm not sure. We're stuck right in the middle of this
yeah.
wave.
And we forget, like, I was just in an office last week with a CEO of a $50 million business, and he's just finished his cloud migration. And so, I mean, that's 12 years in the making of people saying, move to the cloud, move to the cloud. All those commercials from Microsoft and IBM, they all competed 12 years ago, and companies are still doing that migration. And
Oh
so I
yeah,
think this AI wave, we have to be careful that, like, you don't just need to jump into it. You need the right strategy, the right market, the right, protection around what you decide to do with AI. But it's going to take 5, 6, 7 years to actually put a product that your company can use and trust, right? It's not this thing that just jumps off the screen and works right away. It takes a while. And those founders that are building those products that understand it's a 7-year journey, they know if I just go into a market that has, a large enough TAM, but I'm also a part of that TAM because I already have consulting experience there. I already have my community that I can tap into, and I can sell $50,000 a month products or $100,000 a year products. That gives you better insight of like, these are the founders that know what they're doing compared to somebody selling a $4 task management app.
So, you said the magic word. Let's. I'll take the bait. Let's jump into AI.
Sure.
How? If you've heard me before, we do both sides of the coin of AI. So everyone's scrambling to throw it into their conference calls, and then they're calling people like us to say, "What should we do?"
Yeah.
So, what are you telling people to do?
Yeah. So there's 3 levels that I'm kind of getting involved in. The first one is the speaking level of talking to multiple executives at once and explaining to them where the market is going. The second one is going into an office with, somebody that's trying to figure out how to move their corporate data into AI. And then the third one is the startup level of how to help startups utilize AI to efficiently grow their business.
Let's take that one.
Okay, so the startup mentality is they're being told by venture backed, if they're venture backed, that they need to include AI into their product. And what's happening is the AI aspect of this will never create profits. It'll never create additional revenue, at least in its large language model format it is today. It will always create cost and efficiency savings. And so instead of viewing it as this
A lot
magical,
of development time. Yeah,
yeah, and it's a lot
investing.
of development time to build anything, but there's 3 levers that we pull as an agency to help people move into AI, especially in the startup world, and it's latency, cost, and accuracy. And the accuracy part comes with security. The more accurate you can get the system, the less you have to worry about it about talking about hippopotamuses on your brand's dime. And the goal of the accuracy aspect is to inform it of as much knowledge as possible. And so a startup needs to understand that they might not have the data yet. They might just not have the reps. And so AI could be very early for them. And if they don't have that knowledge base of sometimes tens of thousands or hundred thousands of data points, they don't need an AI app yet. They need to be ready for it when they have the data. And I think that's what startups need to recognize, is that just throwing a chatbot is probably more detrimental to your product, because somebody can be talking about hippopotamuses on your brand's dime and taking screenshots of it. And you're also not learning customer feedback at an early stage. You're not in there with humans trying to understand what people are actually doing with your product. So I think the chatbot craze for startups is a little too soon. I do think for enterprise, it's the right methodology if you have the knowledge, massive data sets, you don't want to leak your data anymore, but you also have the controls with an agency such as ourselves that can actually monitor the security to ensure that you're not talking about hippopotamuses on your brand.
What's wrong with hippopotamuses? No, I'm kidding.
I use hippopotamuses because everyone uses building bombs or like
I know.
napalm strikes. So I'm
They
like,
always use something, yeah,
throw
devastating.
hippopotamuses in there because everyone understands.
You know, we do a mixture of the big corporate dogs and the startups here, and the lessons are the lessons they can learn from each other are so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the different models and the different segments, and what did you learn the most about the challenges you faced? I mean, you know, you had to shut down a lot of stuff, and what's it been like for you, and what have you learned?
I think team is the most powerful product you can build, is what I was going to say. But I think that's still true. Like each word is
Not Microsoft
independently
Teams,
important.
Teams.
Yeah, like the team itself. And through
Yeah,
all these
exactly.
years, from 2016 till now, we've had a very good core team. We have 70 individuals now, and we've had people work in the company now for 8 years consistently. And so that model of building a team and going through shutting down companies, starting companies, becoming an agency, I think having the right culture, having the people understand, being very transparent with our revenues, our goals. We run a program called EOS from Gino Wickman. And so every quarter we're up there in front of everybody telling them what our profits are, what type of companies are coming to us, what our clients, what our sales funnel looks like. And we're growing, growing, growing. But like it's very important that the team knows every step of the way how they fit in. And so I think through shutting down the companies, we were transparent with it. We understood. We brought the product manager, we brought the CEOs in as product managers to the agency, but everybody rolled with it. And I think keeping them on the team, keeping them involved with something exciting or a new client that's exciting, and being transparent with them has allowed us to do these movements. And I would advise anyone that the best product you can build is your culture and your team.
Yeah, and having run companies all over the world, I can tell you it was not, what's a polite way to say this? In Silicon Valley in New York, I found it very different to help run a culture than a Chicago or even a Boston, a little friendlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of companies are going to smaller towns now to even though they have a lot of remote employees, many of them still want to have a base culture.
Yeah.
And yeah, what's been the toughest thing you've done besides that you learned from?
Besides shutting down companies?
Yeah, anything tougher than that?
We've had 3 black swan events in our history that happened 3 consecutive years. The first one was the Ukraine. Well, first one was COVID, but we were a remote company, so I would say that was pretty easy for us to deal with. But the second one, we had 25 individuals in Ukraine when the war started. They're still there today. We have 32 now in the
Yeah, a lot
Ukraine
of us
area.
did. They're great developers over there.
Incredible people, very resilient, powerful people too. And we supported them through this entire thing and said, be safe first. We're here to support you. And within 5 days, my famous story goes that I told at MicroConf was within 5 days, their lights started turning on because they were in basements and parking garages, and they were safe, but they started to work. And we hadn't asked them to, but yeah, going through that, especially with clients, especially with not as much revenue as we have now, and trying to support the team. We hired almost 10 developers overnight to support the clients from Poland. And just that was a founder's nightmare, right? Because everything you built for 10 years comes crashing down with a geopolitical war that we can't control.
And it's a good analogy. It doesn't have to be a war. I mean, there's a war going on in every part of your business, right?
Yeah.
The resiliency of a founder is so important these days.
I'd say that one is pretty large. And my personal it was hard personally on that one, but the other personal challenge that I had was Section 179 that appeared in 2022 when Congress forgot to pass the research and development tax credit. And it provided a massive tax bill for all agency owners that had taken research and development tax credits in the past. We had to amortize. Our tax bill went close to $1 million pretty much overnight. And we had to work with both senators and state. And I was the only one that had to do that. And it was a really tough time to figure out how to get enough money to pay taxes basically in a month.
Yeah, nice. I remember that. Andrew, it's good to see you. Thanks for being on. You've been listening to Andrew Amann. He is the CEO of 923 Venture Studio. This is Dean Tobias with the Reboot Chronicles. I want to thank you for joining us today. We'll see you soon.